All right, folks, we got some great Switch 2 stories to bring to you today. We actually got our first look at a Nintendo Switch 2 dev kit, which I think is just interesting for a history perspective and understanding how these systems are made, put together, and how games are made. I just find this stuff to be really cool to look at. We have updated sales from Japan, including, again, a bunch of records being set. No real surprise there. And it's not even the complete sales because digital sales aren't included. And that also includes sales off the My Nintendo store. So physical sales of things like Nintendo Switch 2 do not include the My Nintendo store sales. So the numbers are even higher, which just... It's even crazier to think about once we look at it. We have the announcement of a new game for Nintendo Switch 2. That is always nice to see, and more. So before we dive in, I want to remind you, we are giving away 5 copies of Donkey Kong Bonanza. If you are excited for that game and would like a chance to win a free copy, it's open worldwide. You have to be 18 or older to enter, and all you gotta do is click on the link down in the pinned comment or the description. Thank you guys so much for being here, and let's continue to bring you all the news. Starting with a look at the, dev kit. So Nintendo has some photos up here saying first look at the Switch 2 dev kit, NDK Core Ounce. Pretty cool here. As you see, we can see the dev environment here. You can see the side rails. Pretty much looks exactly like a Switch 2 besides this connector down here. That connector being a unique one for development purposes. But you can see the dev menu application with application, save data, controller, accounts, device, network, play report, time test, debug, error, shop, etc. So install from SD, write to game card, yada yada. So this is obviously what the dev kit looks like, which is basically a Switch 2, but obviously some differences here for developers. You can see the back here has the same kickstand. It's called NDK Core Ounce. There's some tracking data and who this belongs to. So Nintendo could look at these images and actually know exactly whose dev kit this is. Although Nintendo probably doesn't care about these dev kit leaks at this juncture because the system's already out there, right? They're not learning anything here about Switch 2 that we didn't already know, other than what dev kits kind of look like and what the differences are and how you can hook it up here to different stuff here to function and, make video games. So that's what the dev kit looks like when it's hooked up to everything. Here it is in a dev kit dock, obviously with some dongles and accessories coming off for development purposes. And here it is again plugged in, probably for handheld mode testing compared to dock mode testing. And there's that unique connector on the bottom. Again, it's pretty cool to get looks at this. It's just nice for history documenting. Nintendo probably doesn't care at this point. Dev kits are being freely distributed at this point to pretty much anyone who wants one, from what I'm being told. So again, Nintendo knew this stuff was probably going to get out there. They're probably not that mad about it because again, nothing's really being shown about how games are being made. It's just, hey, this is what a development kit looks like, and here's a couple of the differences from launch retail units. All right, let's go ahead and dive in to the Japanese sales charts, because while we do know the worldwide sales were over 3.5 million, we have some exact figures for Japan, which again, just as a reminder, do not include My Nintendo store sales. So let's head on over to My Nintendo News here. It says Japan, Nintendo Switch 2, and Mario Kart World are number 1. So here's the sales chart. So we see that Mario Kart World is number 1, selling 782,566 units. Rune Factory for Nintendo Switch is number 2 at 45,703 units. Then Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time for Nintendo Switch is number 3. Then we see Natsume's Book of Friends, Hazuki no Shirushi. That one is at number 4, also a Switch game. Then we see the lone PlayStation 5 game on the list at Elden Ring Night Rain at number 5, followed up by the Switch 2 version of Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma, and the Switch 2 version of Tears of the Kingdom, then the Switch 2 version of Breath of the Wild, and the Switch 2 version of Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, and then the Nintendo Switch version of Mario Party Jamboree rounds out your top 10. But this is where things get crazy, is when you look at the hardware sales. We have some perspective to add here. So the Switch 2 is number 1 at 947,931 units. Again, this does not include My Nintendo. So what we can say with the My Nintendo sales is it's safe to assume we're probably over 1 million units in Japan alone. How much over depends on how much stock they save for My Nintendo. PlayStation 5 chiming in at 14,535 units. Switch OLED's at number 3. Switch Lite's at number 4. PlayStation 5 Pro and Nintendo Switch. What's actually kind of interesting is if you combine the PlayStation 5 Pro sales along with the entire Xbox Series line of sales, the Switch 2 outsold all of that. Of course, again, it hasn't outsold the PlayStation 5 overall. The PlayStation 5 is at 5 point. Well, actually, if we include the PlayStation Pro sales in, it's actually at 5 point. Let's say 6 million in sales. So already the very first sales chart, it sold 1/6 of the total sales of PlayStation 5. We'll see if these sales continue. It's going to depend on stock. I don't imagine Nintendo's going to have as much stock for week 2 as they did week 1, but still, it is absolutely neat to look at. And we're not done because, again, we got to do some comparisons. So how about to some all-time launches in Japan? The number one opening week launches ever. So this Genki account here says Nintendo Switch 2 was the biggest video game console launch ever in Japan, selling 947k units in its first week. PlayStation 2 is the second largest at 630,552. Game Boy Advance number 3, and then Nintendo DS. But we have even more comparisons to look at, and that's what I find interesting here because Necro Felipe put up this thing that I think is just really cool to look at. So it says, when you put into perspective the Switch 2's featuring in Japan in 4 days, it sold everything the Xbox Series has made there since its debut, outsold the Nintendo Switch 1 in the whole of 2025. That's what's interesting here. So in 2025, the Nintendo Switch has sold 856,261 units. In 4 days, Nintendo Switch 2 outsold the entirety of Switch sales this year. And Switch was the number one seller in Japan this year. Pretty crazy that Switch 2 just passed it just like that. But it also goes to show that people were really, really ready for this next system, especially in Japan. And the last thing is we have some charts here coming from Install Base based on Famitsu numbers. And it says, hardware debut sales in Japan. Obviously, we saw those other numbers, but this is crazy. You look at just like recent things in PlayStation 5, Switch, PS4, Wii U, PS Vita, 3DS. These are like the most recent systems. And it crushed it. Like, damn, we already know it crushed it for the highest record ever, but just looking at recent releases, damn, is it crushed it. And then just looking at Mario Kart, you can see all the Mario Kart debuts, or a majority of them anyways. And you see the biggest debut is actually Mario Kart Wii, which is interesting, 608,000. It destroyed that number. And again, this doesn't include digital sales. That's the big thing to remember is back on Mario Kart Wii, you couldn't really buy it digitally. So I find this to be really interesting. So again, we don't have digital sales included at all. We don't know if bundled sales are included. I'm assuming bundled sales are in there. I don't know. But the point is those sales are absolutely incredible. Kudos to Nintendo. They obviously had an amazing launch. Not that we didn't know that. Now, I did mention a new game was announced today. And it is a old game coming back, but coming back in a complete edition, which is always nice to see. And we are talking about, NIS America announcing that the Disageae 7 Complete is coming exclusively to the Switch 2. This version contains all DLC and more content. It's releasing this fall. And it's always good to just see complete editions of games. Look, obviously, it's a way to resell. But this version, having this complete version exclusive to the Switch 2 is obviously them trying to take advantage of the fever around Switch 2. I think this version should just exist on everything, but this is also the kind of game Nintendo doesn't typically put in their directs. NIS America doesn't really make it into directs. Anyone that thinks this is like, oh man, we're not going to, have a direct this month because of this game being announced, this is literally not the kind of thing that ends up in a direct anyways. But it's just nice to see that this is coming over here. And so I'm happy. The fans of the series are probably happy as well that we're hoping for an updated complete edition. Always nice to see. Now, what also is interesting is we know that the Nintendo Switch 2 does not have M.2 slots, right? So the way to expand the memory is with microSD Express. But what you might not know about microSD Express is it actually conforms to one of the M.2 standards. And because of that, an adapter is being officially made to convert the microSD card slot into an M.2 slot. I'm not really sure how this is going to work, especially because like the kickstand kind of covers over it. I guess maybe you'll have to etch out part of the kickstand to run a cable. I don't know. But let's look at this article at WCCF Tech. So Nintendo Switch 2 microSD Express to M.2 SSD adapters in the works. A Nintendo Switch 2 microSD Express M.2 open source adapters in the works, potentially allowing users to get more storage space at a lower price. The project's GitHub, which was launched this week, provided the first information on the process, revealing that such an adapter is made possible because the console's microSD Express slot supports the SD Express 7.1 standard, which exposes a true PCIe Gen 3x1 interface and utilizes the NVMe protocol for communication. As such, the adapter maps PCIe X1 from the Switch 2's microSD express slot to a standard M.2 2230 NVMe SSD, and no protocol translation is required as the Nintendo Switch 2 host controller handles everything. Currently, the project's development seems to be proceeding smoothly, and the team is actively developing the PCB layout and testing. While the adapter on paper should be working without any issue, the team warns that there is a possibility of power-related issues due to the power draw of the M.2 SSD, which could be more than the Switch 2 can handle, so a basic level of power filter has been added to hopefully establish a connection. Still, it is advised to only use the low voltage M.2 2230 NVMe drives and not attempt to use the adapter on legacy microSD slots, such as those of the original Switch systems. While the Switch 2 will not be remembered for its innovative gaming system, it is an excellent console and a clear upgrade from its predecessor. I think this is just kind of a neat little mod that people are doing, being like, hey, look, because this company supports such a good standard, we can go ahead and just be like, hey, we can actually convert this. Now, you might need a little bit of extra power added to the device or just using low power NVMEs, but the point is, it's just a way to modify the system that isn't a true modification. It's just taking advantage of a standard Nintendo is using to expand the type of storage you can use. That still doesn't mean it'll support more than 2 terabytes, but considering there is not a 2 terabyte micro SD express card at the moment, it is a way to get 2 terabytes added to your system, and also maybe done in a way that's cheaper than even buying a complete 1 terabyte thing. If you can get a 2 terabyte NVMe for like $100 or less, a cheap one that has the low power draw, and then on top of that, you get this PCB ends up costing like $20 or something. You just got a really damn good deal for 2 terabytes. Obviously, you know, they got a lot to consider here. They got to think of how they're going to enclose this PCB and actually make it safe to use, unless you're just using it in docked mode only. And even then, like the way the kickstand covers the micro SD card slot, there might need to be a modification made there. I don't know. There's a lot of considerations and probably some 3D printing magic going on, but I'm actually kind of excited to see what the community comes with if this does end up functioning really, really well. Right now, it's just in the testing phase, and we'll see what comes when it makes it to market. All right, next up, we're going to briefly talk about Street Fighter 6. Not because I'm going to sit here and do gameplay comparisons and all that's been done, but because the Switch 2 version has helped Street Fighter 6 reach a major sales milestone. It's now the second best-selling entry ever. So the fighting game, which was released in 2023 on PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam, was one of 2 Capcom titles to launch aside Nintendo Switch 2 last week. Street Fighter 6 and Disageae, Path of the Goddess, both released on Nintendo's latest console at launch. The Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game has pushed the latest entry of the legacy fighting game franchise over 5 million copies sold. This places Street Fighter 6 as the 16th best-selling Capcom game ever and the second best-selling Street Fighter game ever. Only Street Fighter 5 has sold more at just under 8 million units, according to Capcom. Over the weekend, Capcom confirmed the game's 3rd year of DLC content. Sega Viper and Alex will join the game later this year, followed by Ingrid in the first half of 2026. The final DLC character in Street Fighter 6's Year 2 content was released on Thursday. So that's really cool. I'm glad to see things getting better for the Street Fighter series and Switch 2 helping it along. Also, just sticking with that Capcom theme, this is a semi-related story. They do consider that game key cards as digital sales, which makes a lot of sense, even though you can resell them. That, you know what, it's still a digital download. So they just want to count it as that. Other companies might count it as a physical sale. But I don't know. Like we sit here and so you sit here and you see like the Stephen Kick CEO of Night Dive Studios, that Nintendo is doing this is a little disheartening. You would hope the company that big as such a storied history would take preservation a little more seriously. Far Cry, Assassin's Creed 3, and Revenge of the Sabbath Planet director Alex Hutcherson criticizes the game key cards as well. But here's the thing, publishers are praising it. So yeah, obviously people that love game preservation are not a fan of key cards, but obviously publishers love it because it's a way to lower the cost of physical copies, even though it's not really physical, and Capcom's saying it's not. But whatever. You know what? They're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. Love it or hate it. We can keep complaining. Just don't buy them. Speak with your wallet. Only buy the games that are full physical. I know, okay? You can yell at me. I'm not speaking with my wallet. I totally get it, right? I got Bravely Default over here. This is a game key card. What else I got? Technically, I bought Split Fiction, which is a code in a box, although I will note, I was always going to buy this game digitally anyways. So I just bought this so I could have that little thing on the bottom that denotes it's it's a code in a box, because I wanted to be able to show in future live streams and stuff like the difference on what to look for on the boxes to know if it's a full physical, a game key card, or a code in a box. I don't ever actually plan to buy another code in the box game. We have a full physical obviously here in Cyberpunk, but there's another one here. There's another game key card here in Yakuza 0. And I'm going to be honest, I may buy more game key cards over time. Just looking at my other games I sit in here. Okay, these are just like Switch games and stuff, but yeah, I may buy more key cards over time. I don't really plan to buy a lot of them. But occasionally, if I think they come with some like cool stickers, or I just really like the box art, maybe I'll pick it up, because if it's something I was planning to buy and I'm going to end up buying it digitally anyways, there is still that advantage of resale. And the whole people worried about, well, the download servers might not be available forever. Well, that's the same issue digitally. So if I was still planning to buy the game digitally, but I just happen to like the box art or something, I still might pick it up. And you might go, well, Nate, that sucks because what you're doing is supporting game key cards. Well, yeah, but if I was going to buy it digitally, I'm also supporting all digital, right? So, look, be mad at me, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. What I can say is I'm really excited because my GameCube controller arrived yesterday on the podcast, and I haven't used it yet, but I do have it fully charged. I'm going to get it synced up to my Switch 2 here, and hopefully today get a little bit of gameplay in with it. We'll see. I got kind of a busy day. My kids got like baseball practice and doctor's appointments and all this other stuff going on. Family things. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. That is today's news for the Nintendo Switch 2. Hopefully you enjoyed all that, because we'll be back tonight with a Q&A live stream, and that's going to be a fun one as well. So you know what? I'll catch you guys all then.